Welcome to In the Know with the Stafford SO, a podcast presented by the Stafford County Sheriff's Office in Virginia that brings you the stories of the men and women who work tirelessly to keep our community safe each day. With In the Know with the Stafford SO, you'll find out what life is really like behind the law enforcement badge. Thank you for listening and thank you for your support.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Know with the Stafford SO. I'm Kathy Volbrecht, your host. Thanks for tuning in. Today is the first podcast in a series that we are going to do on National Crime Victims' Rights Week, which is April 18th through the 24th. Today's podcast will focus on domestic violence, and we will also have a podcast on bullying and scams later on in the week. But for today, we are going to focus on National Crime Victims' Rights Week and the resources that we provide for domestic violence victims here in the area. And to help shine the light on that, we have several guests that I am very excited to welcome to the podcast. And we're going to start with Detective Jenny Powell, who is with the Stafford Sheriff's Office Domestic Violence Unit. Detective Powell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We also have Anna Cancel, who also works with the Sheriff's Office Domestic Violence Unit. Anna, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We also have a group from Empower House, which is a nonprofit organization providing confidential domestic violence assistance in our area, including Stafford County. And I am very happy to welcome Susan Sigmund, who is a court advocate with Empower House. Susan, welcome back. I know you've joined us before on the podcast.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here.
Wonderful. We also have Abby Tadero, who is a youth resiliency advocate with Empower House. Abby, thanks for coming today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And finally, we have Jackie Oliveira, who is one of the Latina Support Service Coordinators, and she supports Latino victims and survivors in all of the court jurisdictions in our area. Jackie, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Well, we have a lot to talk about. This is a very important week, and I want to go ahead and get right into what we're going to be doing. But let's step back for a second and just give a little bit of background to our new listeners. And for those who might not know, let's start with some background on the Domestic Violence Unit and the partnership that the Stafford Sheriff's Office has with Empower House. Detective Powell, can you just talk a little bit about what the unit's role is and how you work with Empower House?
Absolutely. We started the unit in 2019. When I say we, I mean Anna and I, we review the majority of the domestic violence cases and just assess a need for an additional investigation or if victims need additional resources. We work really closely with Empower House, namely Susan. She's always at the Sheriff's Office. We're a really great team. It's definitely a crucial part of our unit to have that dynamic of a detective, victim advocate, and Empower House. It's invaluable. We use each other as kind of a checks and balances, and it allows us to put the victim first.
Anna, can you talk a little bit more about what you do with the Domestic Violence Unit?
Sure. So between Jenny and myself, we have eyes on most, if not all, the domestic violence and intimate partner cases here in the county. So we're constantly reviewing all of the cases. I'm constantly reading through all the reports and assessing the need for immediate services or outreach. A lot of the times, it's a lot of outreach to victims and providing them with information on the forefront from time of arrest or, when an investigation starts. A lot of times I'm present when a victim comes to be interviewed by Detective Powell. So that gives us a good opportunity to address the person right then and there in person, because everybody knows an in-person conversation is different than a phone conversation. It's a lot of providing support for victims, and getting them squared away with any services they may need, once somebody is arrested.
Okay. Now let's also talk about the other piece of our partnership that really helps us provide the resources to our and services to our victims of crime, and that's Empower House. Susan, do you want to go ahead and start with talking about the partnership that you have with the Sheriff's Office, and then we'll get into a little bit more about some of the other services that the other ladies provide.
Sure, thank you. So we are really excited. We've always, worked with Stafford County in regards to providing co-resources and services when it comes to victims of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, as Anna mentioned earlier. We have, within the past few years, entered also into a grant partnership with Stafford County Sheriff's Office and also through Mary Washington Healthcare System with providing some essential forensic nursing capabilities also as well. So it kind of ties into the law enforcement link if a survivor ends up receiving medical care at the hospital. So we are really, really excited that we have the opportunity to be co-located within the Sheriff's Office. Our services are 100% free and 100% confidential. VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women's Act, is the federal law that protects that privacy and that confidentiality. But we also know that when survivors report to law enforcement about what is occurring within the confines of that relationship, that can be kind of frightening for them. They don't know what those next steps are. So working in tandem with the Sheriff's Office, Empower House does a lot of risk assessment, a lot of safety planning. Sometimes that may involve sheltering services. And so while we can each operate within our unique set of skills and supports that we can provide to survivors, we can also have, if it's appropriate, those overlapping services too. And having wraparound services is going to best serve a survivor because this is absolutely a life-changing event from the moment that they disclose the abuse that they are experiencing in their relationship.
I love that term that you use, wraparound services, because I think it just conjures up this image of Stafford County working with Empower House and our domestic violence unit and just kind of putting their arms around these victims who don't know where to turn to. We're letting them know that, hey, we're here to help you in every way possible.
That's correct. And through the MOU and the grant agreement too, that also entails the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, it really does provide that tiered approach to providing support to survivors. And that's so critical because there are barriers that survivors face. They're facing their abuser. There may be economic hardships. There may be fear of concern about, what are people going to quote think? A lot of survivors feel a sense of shame and embarrassment. It's not their fault. This is the abuser's fault. It's the abuser's shame. It's the abuser accountability and offender accountability that comes into play here. But for a survivor, that's very, very difficult. They have concerns about their children. So many of the things that sometimes some of us may take for granted. We may not realize the courage that it takes for a survivor to actually disclose the abuse and to reach out and to really take that leap of faith, whether they're calling the Sheriff's Office, whether they're calling our 24-hour confidential hotline. There's a lot of collateral consequences that survivors consider in every single decision they make. And so the courage that they have is something that's not lost on anybody at this panel or within our individual agencies.
Right. Let's talk about the sort of the group of people that you do provide services to. I think, when we hear the term crime victims, maybe one of the first things we think about are adults, but there are very young people, children, who are also victims of crime. And I wanted to return it to Abby, who is the Youth Resiliency advocate. And can you talk a little bit about that, Abby? What do you do for the youth who are victims of the crimes?
Yeah, of course. So as a youth resiliency advocate, I went into schools pre-COVID and we did school presentations. We saw about like 12,000 students last year, and we're doing presentations about what a healthy relationship is, what are good communication styles, and just hard topics that maybe parents may not want to talk about with their kids. And then so since COVID has happened, we are doing it virtually. Been very fortunate to still have those connections with the schools. And so we switched it into virtual.
Okay.
And so we also, because of COVID, we have a new service, and it's working with our housing children. So these children have been exposed to domestic violence. So they are maybe traumatized, they may be confused, they may have a lot of anxiety because of what they saw. So this new services allows me to work with them. So what I do is I have weekly calls with them. So I call them every week around the same time and the same day, so they have that consistency. And then we do like activities together. We may do like a craft together on the phone. We also do it virtually, so they can see me, I can see them. But this just allows them to have someone else in their corner and someone else to be able to talk to if they don't have that special person in their life, or that supportive parent in their life, or whatever that may be. And then we also do drop off. So if the family needs like food or basic necessities, or needs an activity for the kids to stay busy because everybody's staying at home. So this just also allows the parents to have some time, and then also gives the children time to like process what they've seen and talk to me about what they've seen.
That was a great segue into one of the next topics I wanted to talk about, which is how COVID has impacted the work that you all do. But before we do that, I want to just step over to Jackie. And can you talk a little bit about how you help the community, Jackie, with the specific services that you provide through Empower House?
Sure, yes. I'm one of the Latino advocates. So during COVID, it was a challenge for the Latino community to connect with their family and friends, and just, it's a cultural thing for us to gather on a regular basis with family. So during COVID, that was very difficult for them to reach out to their family and friends and have somebody to talk to if they were experiencing domestic violence. So we maintained a close relationship with our clients that we already had, but also outreach to the Latino community, Latino churches, food banks, anything that we possibly could think of to reach the Latino community, and letting them know that we were here to service them and to help them.
Okay. Susan, is there anything you want to add as far as the COVID impact on Empower House, and how that changed how you work with Stafford County?
Sure. So thank you so much for asking that. I actually brought a little bit of information regarding that. So I think that was a question on the minds of a lot of people, is what is COVID doing, and how has this pandemic impacted survivors? And what we know and what our experience has been is survivors are already experiencing a lot of isolation and a lot of being cut off from friends and family, and maybe at their jobs, and some of the, again, freedoms that we may take for granted if we're in a healthy relationship. And so abusers kind of weaponized COVID. This was another opportunity to further isolate their partner from friends and from family and from support services. I think it's real important to know that during the pandemic, which I know we're still in, but Empower House did not cease providing services. We remained open to providing services to clients. Our sheltering services have remained open this entire time. We know that this has absolutely had a drastic impact for a lot of families in our planning district. And so we had to maybe rework some things in the playbook a little bit, but we managed to absolutely continue doing what we do for the past 42 plus years. I did bring some statistics just for people who might be interested in that. During the first 7 months of the pandemic, we had 1,212 hotline callers that we helped, which was a 28% increase from the same period of the year prior. We spent a little over $1,300 a day, which was about an average of 28 people each night, providing sheltering services and serving victims and their children. Of course, we had an increase in cleaning supplies and PPE and things like that. We continue to provide court supports and court services during the times the courts were open, assisting people walking through that process of filing protective orders or navigating through the legal justice system. We increased our bed nights of shelter, which was about a 34% increase over the same time period last year. So absolutely COVID had an impact. And as Abby mentioned, virtual school presentations instead of in-person presentations, those folks that are getting, at the school age level, information on healthy relationships, what that looks like, those red flags that friends and peers can talk to each other about, and finding support and information in that is really, really critical. So we're so glad that we can still continue that as well. So yes, COVID has had an impact, but we're plowing right through and making sure we can do everything we can to support survivors.
Now, Detective Powell, what about the domestic violence unit? I'm sure you experienced something similar with COVID and the impact that you and Anna were able to provide to our citizens.
I would say the biggest challenge during COVID was victims' accessibility to law enforcement and services, because they just didn't have that separation from their abuser to either come in, report. But other than that, for us, I mean, we still did what we had to do. I don't think it changed a lot of what outcomes would have been. But like Susan said, we had to adapt and overcome some of the obstacles that we met along the way. And I think we were successful in doing that.
Okay.
I couldn't agree more. I think everybody, so many county offices or community resources had to adapt to how they service victims. I know for the sheriff's office, they, conducted business as usual in terms of responding to scenes and helping victims. They adapted, but their priority was still helping victims and safety, so they did everything they could in their power to still protect victims and still respond and try to help them out.
Okay, well, thank you for adding that. Let's go ahead and move on and talk about National Crime Victims' Rights Week, which is April 18th through the 24th. The goal of that campaign is to promote community-wide public awareness of the rights and available services for victims of all types of crimes. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the activities that you have planned. And we'll go back to Empower House. And I don't know if Susan, if you want to start off with talking about some of the things that you've got going on that week, that would be great.
Sure. So we were very grateful that we were included in this initiative that's going to be taking place in April, specifically during that week. I know Sergeant Burgess with the Crime Prevention Unit is heading up a lot of the activities of that week, specifically highlighting not only victims of crime, but bullying, scams, and also intimate partner violence. So we are very excited. Anytime there's an opportunity to have a conversation, talking about domestic violence doesn't feel comfortable for a lot of people, but the more we talk about it, the more we take the stigma away. So during that week specifically, in addition to this podcast, I know there's going to be a lot of public awareness and some outreach done, like some visual displays. And then it's my understanding at Embry Mill on Friday the 23rd from 6 to 8 p.m. There's going to be a community outreach program to include like a vigil and a walk, and there'll be some tents set up, it's my understanding, with different agencies that support victims of crime will be there representing, with some handout and literatures. And I think there's going to be a lot more information coming from the sheriff's office specifically on this, but for our part and our involvement, we will be there. Some of our staff will be available. We'll have literature and displays and some takeaway things for folks. So we're really looking forward to this event.
Now, Abby and Jackie, also with Empower House, is there anything you'd like to add about some of the things that you have planned for that week?
I don't think so. I am really excited to join the walk. I'm definitely going to be going to that to show my appreciation to all the community that cares for the victims, and as well as bringing awareness to this event.
Jackie, how about you?
Yes, for sure. I plan to be there as well and just support everyone, support the sheriff's office and the community in helping and supporting all the victims of violence.
The candlelight vigil, we're very excited. We'll also be participating in that. We're going to have a table set up, um, some resources available to the victims, really just putting like a face to the name, so people see us, recognize us, and we just want to promote awareness for our unit and, that we're there to support the victims.
Now, all of you have done such a wonderful job talking about the specific services that you provide. And I just wanted to remind people, though, that if they feel that they've been a victim of a crime, what would you suggest is the first thing they should do? I mean, obviously call 911, but sometimes that's not always easy for them to do, especially if it's a domestic situation. Detective Powell, maybe you can add a little bit more to that.
Absolutely. It's going to be different in every situation for each individual victim. The reasonings behind not coming forward the first time could be children, financial reasons, or availability. They may have been cut off completely from the world, friends, no vehicle, no phone, that sort of thing. So that can hamper a victim reporting. But one of the things that they could do, I know Susan promotes the hotline that they have for Empower House. If they have that option, they can always reach out to them. Of course, their safety is paramount. So if it's an emergency situation, 911, and deputies will respond as quickly as they can. And even if they just want to walk into the sheriff's office, we try to have, obviously with teleworking and things of that nature, we try to have an individual in the office all the time that can take the reports. And I'm talking like patrol deputies, they're out there always. But as far as like the domestic violence unit, we can come out, greet you, just I'll come talk to them first. If they're not comfortable talking to someone in uniform, that's absolutely fine. And maybe that's what they need versus having a patrol officer respond, because it can be very scary if you're in a domestic situation, domestic violence situation, or intimate partner crime situation. To have somebody of authority, come and take your report, that may be a little bit scary for them. So myself or Anna would be willing to meet with them at the sheriff's office if that's easier for them. We also have the non-emergency number. So there are a lot of different ways. Personally, if they need to flag down a deputy driving by them at that time, do it. We'll get you whatever resources and anything that you need, we'll try to get that for you.
And like you said, if they're not comfortable talking to somebody in a uniform or sort of an authority figure, there is the hotline that you mentioned. And Susan, can you talk about that for a second?
Absolutely. So the hotline is confidential. We always have an advocate staffing that hotline. The number is 540-373-9373. And anyone can call the hotline if they need to talk to an advocate, if they have questions, if they want to talk about their situation, they have questions about the services we provide. We also get calls sometimes from friends and family members in regards to a person that they are concerned about and asking for a little bit of guidance on, how do I help this person that is important in my life because I see what they're experiencing or I have some concerns. So we can talk people through that. One thing I can share is if someone shares or discloses that they are in a situation where there's intimate partner violence and abuse occurring, one of the most important things you can do is tell them you believe them. That is one of the most important first steps you can do. Not feel like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Absolutely, I believe what you're saying. Did you know that there's a hotline you can call and you can talk to people who are trained and experienced in these situations, and they'll be able to give you some guidance on what to do. So again, that number is 540-373-9373, and it's a 24-hour hotline.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask Abby, these same tips and suggestions apply to our young people as well. If maybe there's a friend out there who notices that their friend is having trouble and might be in a domestic violence situation, they should turn to either Empower House or the sheriff's office for help.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so when I do the school presentations, at the end of the presentation, we share all of our services with the children, and we explain what a hotline is. Obviously, we tell them if it's an emergency, call 911, but we are there for that emotional support afterwards. So we've had children call the hotline. I've had a teen call the hotline just wanting information about what we do, maybe like the teen girls group or the teen boys group, as well as advice like he was fighting with his friend, he didn't know what to do and how to handle that. And then we also have people who were in the presentations and they give the information to their parents. And so that has been very effective. And because we show the hotline, they write it down, they write down all the services, and then they go have that conversation with their parents if they're comfortable. And if they're aware of what's going on, then the parent does call us and thank us for going to the school and giving that information to them. So it definitely does have the same effect on the teens and the children in the community.
And it's so important too. I mean, for them to know that, there is somewhere they can turn to for help because they're so young and they may not know that these services exist. So it's good for them to spread the word. And, if they know that they have a friend who is experiencing some kind of violence at home or with other friends, that there is somebody they can turn to.
Can I add something to that real quick, Kathy? At a recent, within the past month or so, I know Abby and some of the other team members on the youth team were giving one of those presentations. And in real time, we had some of the middle school and high school students that were calling into our hotline as the presentation was occurring. So we were getting that information as they were giving out the information for those red flags and healthy dating tips and things like that. So it's really critical. This is an opportunity to really change the trajectory of a young person's life and maybe really change the trajectory of intimate partner violence in our community.
Right. And to tell them, don't be afraid to reach out for yourself or for your friends or family.
Yeah, I would like to also add that the hotline, we can connect with someone who speaks Spanish or any other language. So if they do speak Spanish or any other language, I would not like for them to hold back thinking that we cannot connect them with someone who speaks their own language. We will for sure make sure that they have someone they can speak to.
It's just going back to what Susan said in the beginning, that, it's these, we're putting your arms around you, these wraparound services, and we're going to help you in any way that we can. And we will support you throughout the whole process that you're going through. Well, ladies, that wraps up my questions. Is there anything that any of you would like to add before we end our podcast?
I would just like to add, we're here. We're always here whenever someone decides that the time is right for them. There's so many resources. The sheriff's office is so fortunate to have such a wonderful working relationship with so many community partners. Empower House is wonderful. I know they've been around for ages. If it's not us, then they can get help there or somewhere else, but we're always here whenever someone decides that they're ready. We're here to help.
Thank you, Jackie, for what you said about we do have access to language resources so that we can have conversations with anyone of any language that does call in to our hotline. And just overall, the message for anyone who's experiencing violence at the hands of their partner. It's about 1 in 4 women and about 1 in 9 men in their lifetime that this will occur. And please know it is not your fault. You are not alone. We believe you, we support you, and we are here when you decide the time is right and safe for you. We will be here waiting.
That is excellent information. Thank you all for joining me on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. I'd like to give out one more reminder about National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and that is April 18th through the 24th. There are activities planned, as you heard throughout the podcast, throughout the community that week. And we will end the week with that candlelight vigil walk on Friday, April 23rd at Embry Mill here in Stafford. And that runs from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And if you would like to find out more information about the services that are offered to crime victims here in the county, you can visit the Stafford County Sheriff's Office website at staffordsheriff.com or the Empower House website at empowerhouseva.org. And there is also that hotline that we mentioned, which is 540-373-9373. That wraps up this episode of In the Know with the Stafford SO. Please be sure to tune into our 2 upcoming podcasts highlighting National Crime Victims' Rights Weeks when we talk about bullying, specifically cyberbullying, and scams. Once again, I am Kathy Volbrecht with the Stafford County Sheriff's Office. Thanks for joining me today. Have a safe and wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to In the Know with the Stafford SO. This podcast is produced by members of the Sheriff's Office and is one more way we connect with our community. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Visit our website at staffordsheriff.com for details about our social media channels as well as events where you can meet our staff. Thank you for your support.